So it's been announced that Georges St-Pierre is coming out of retirement to challenge Michael Bisping for the middleweight championship of the world. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call a super fight. Now, super fights used to be something that we could only speculate about and dream of, but now with the new ownership of the UFC and the recent successes that we've seen from mixing different champions from different weight classes, it seems like the super fight is here to stay. And that got us excited, because here at What Culture MMA, we start to think what else could happen in the next calendar year. So without further ado, I'm Joe Hendry, this is What Culture MMA, and this is the 10 super fights that could happen in 2017. In at number 10 is Georges St-Pierre versus Nate Diaz. Let's say that Georges St-Pierre is unsuccessful against Michael Bisping. We can't just ignore the fact that he's still considered to be one of the greatest that the sport has ever seen. And we've already seen GSP go up against Nick Diaz, but in his absence, Nate has established his own superstar brand. With Nate having no issues moving to welterweight as seen in his bouts with Conor McGregor, this could be the matchup that gets Nate back in the octagon. In at number 9, Jon Jones versus the winner of Stipe Miocic versus Junior Dos Santos. Jon Jones has been quite vocal about the possibility of him one day moving up to heavyweight, and bar a few moments of trouble in a war with Gustafsson, Jones has been basically playing MMA career on easy mode. He's ran through absolutely everyone and anyone, whilst often being compromised for outside activities, shall we say. There's a strong argument to say that Jon is the most gifted athlete that the UFC has ever seen. He seems to have the perfect balance of technique, physical gifts and fighting acumen to be unbeatable at light heavyweight, so the world is curious to know if these attributes will translate to heavyweight, and we'd like to think that if Jones were to move up, he'd be in line for an immediate title shot against the heavyweight champion, provided that he can keep out of trouble until then. Up next, it's TYRON Woodley versus Conor McGregor. Now that we've seen TYRON Woodley has just overcome Stephen Thompson and defeated him in the rematch, maybe it's time to revisit some of the bad blood between the notorious one Conor McGregor and the welterweight champion of the world in TYRON Woodley. There's already some beef here, and this could provide Conor with the opportunity to become the first triple weight champion in UFC history. If Woodley was unable to keep Conor at bay, this could be a record that could stand for a very long time indeed. And up next, that brings us to the possibility of TYRON Woodley versus Georges St-Pierre. Now, for Georges St-Pierre, it's a shame that Stephen Thompson didn't win in the rematch, because GSP's already called him the greatest striker that he's ever seen, so there was some interest in that match. But now that TYRON Woodley is the undisputed champion, this is the potential welterweight title fight that we're looking at for Georges St-Pierre. Giving the long queue of behemoths waiting for him if he's successful in overcoming Michael Bisping, this might be the next logical step for GSP to go back to welterweight and try to reclaim the division that he once ruled. In at number 6, it's CODY GARBRANDT versus Demetrious Johnson. In the men's bantamweight division, it seemed that the only thing that could defeat Dominic Cruz was an injury. That was until CODY GARBRANDT dethroned him as the bantamweight champion of the world with his star-making, unbelievable performance which involved dancing, mockery and devastating power. On the other hand, you've got flyweight champion Demetrious Johnson holding court at the top of the pound for pound rankings, and with Dominic Cruz always being in previous discussion at the top of that list, a fight between CODY GARBRANDT and Demetrious Johnson could be very interesting indeed, and it could be the payday that Mighty Mouse has been waiting for, and neither man seems opposed to this matchup. In at number 5, ALDO versus CODY GARBRANDT. On the flip side of the previous discussion, GARBRANDT has also been quick to call out ALDO as well, and as we know, Aldo is technically the featherweight champion, but it's hard not to think of it as a tarnished championship given how quickly Conor's featherweight title was revoked. But what better way for Aldo to cement himself as a fighting champ once again than by defeating the bantamweight champion in GARBRANDT. It does seem that GARBRANDT is intent on seeking out those super fights, and those are two that we quite frankly love to see. In at number 4, it's Amanda Nunes versus the 145-pound women's featherweight champion. So on one hand, we've got Amanda Nunes, who we know is a star. We've established that, and there's some amazing potential matchups for her at 145 pounds in a super fight. But the problem is, there's still a bit of controversy over who the rightful 145-pound women's champion is, because yes, de Randamie technically won the fight, but there was some illegal blows that the referee didn't compensate and take any points away for, so Holly Holm is no doubt going to want first crack at the champ. However, now with Cyborg clear to compete, it's not out with the realms of possibility that with also the entertainment focus from the new owners that they'll want de Randamie to defend the championship against Cyborg before Holly Holm. It could happen. So the options for this potential super fight spanning the women's bantamweight and featherweight divisions are as follows. We could immediately launch into NUNES versus de Randamie, which would be a rematch from earlier on in their careers when the lighter fighter NUNES was actually able to pick up the victory. Or we could wait a while and perhaps we see Holly Holm get a rematch and claim the championship. Or Cyborg might come back in time, get the match with de Randamie first, and then NUNES versus Cyborg could be the super fight that we didn't know we needed to see. In at number 3 is George St. Pierre versus Anderson Silva. This super fight could have been at number 1 on this list if we'd been talking about this just a few years earlier, because if you remember, before he retired, GSP was unstoppable at 170 and Anderson was widely regarded as the greatest of all time, as that unbeatable middleweight champion. Everyone wanted to know who the better martial artist was, but with GSP riding off into the sunset and Anderson collecting a number of unfortunate losses, it seemed like this super fight was never going to happen. But now both of them are active in the UFC. Now might be the time to revisit this one. In at number 2 is Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor in a boxing match. This is a matchup that doesn't just span weight classes, it spans entire sports, because this could by far be the biggest pay-per-view in combat sports history. Many feel that the technical wizard that is Mayweather would dispose of the Notorious One with his defensive boxing style, but let's not forget that Conor has youth on his side and the well-documented ability to put people to sleep on a moment's notice. Sure, Mayweather would be the bookies' favourite, but it's not unthinkable to think that Conor couldn't dethrone Mayweather and hand him his first defeat via knockout. McGregor has made a career of achieving the unthinkable, and perhaps this is just one more step on his ladder to greatness. And our number 1, Conor McGregor versus George St. Pierre. If this were to happen under the right set of circumstances, we could be looking at the biggest MMA fight of all time. Anything can happen in the world of MMA, so for fun, let's just speculate the best possible variety of circumstances that we could see leading into this fight. Let's say that the Mayweather fight doesn't happen after all, and instead Conor goes for the welterweight strap, and let's say it's successful, and around the same time, let's say that GSP does manage to beat Michael Bisping to become the middleweight champion of the world. Let's say that Conor jumps up to challenge for the middleweight championship, which yes, is insane, but let's not forget that he has done that jump before of 2 weight classes. And in that scenario, you would have the lightweight, welterweight and uncrowned featherweight champion of the world challenging for the middleweight championship. By this point, you'd have to say that this would be a matchup between the 2 greatest mixed martial artists of their eras facing each other to find out who the true greatest of all time is in the sport of mixed martial arts. We know there's a lot of crazy speculation in this list, but anything can happen in the world of mixed martial arts, and that's why we love it. This has been What Culture MMA. I'm Joe Hendry, and you can follow me at Joe S. Hendry on Twitter. Please make sure that you like, share and subscribe. We'd love to have you back. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you next time.